Okay, so today we're going to talk about boredom. And if we let's just try to figure out what we're talking about at first, okay? So from Wikipedia, and I'm just going to read the introduction to Wikipedia because I think it's actually sort of telling. In conventional uses, boredom, ennui, or tedium is an emotional characterization of uninterest in one's surroundings, often caused by lack of distractions or occupations. Although, quote, there is no universally accepted definition of boredom, but whatever it is, researchers argue, it is not simply another name for depression or apathy. It seems to be a specific mental state that people find unpleasant, a lack of stimulation that leaves them craving relief, with a host of behavioral, medical, and social consequences. According to BBC News, boredom can be dangerous and disruptive state of mind that damages your health. Yet research suggests that without boredom, we couldn't achieve our creative feats. So that seems pretty unclear. Is boredom good? Is it bad? Is it something that is a lack of stimulation or an overstimulation? Are we actually trying to get at something, or are we just that? Right? Could it be both? Jack Kornfield calls boredom when we are without awareness. In an article at Lions Roar magazine, Josh Crota calls it fascinating, and he says, "When we're bored, we're uncomfortable with our basic state of being." So, what do we actually mean when we say I'm bored? Is it a state of disinterest, craving, inattention, or something else? Is it the feeling that I don't want to experience this right now, which would be a form of anger? When we're too excited or too distracted, unable to settle in, is there too much lethargy that leads to sort of the slog and slowing and like walking through mud and inability to take action? The difference of how we perceive our boredom affects how we handle it. So the first step is to get interested in it. It's really the only way to begin to form an exit is to find interest within it. So boredom seems sometimes to be more akin, sometimes, to a physical sensory aggression, right? More than a mental state. So sometimes it's like, I can't get comfortable. I got to wiggle. I got to move. I want this. I want that. Sort of an anxious desire to do these things or feel some sensory craving, right? Like if I can just find the perfect food, the perfect drink, the perfect music, the best thing to smell, right? Like the flowers or the incense or this or that or the perfect position, then I'll be okay. So there's sort of this state of agitation. Could it be physical, auditorio, gustatorio, visual, or some weird combination that we just can't settle? It's like I can find the right piece of that puzzle, the right thing to just make everything click into place. Then things will settle down and I'll get back to normal. And, this leads to actually not doing anything because we can't find that perfect thing. So we get bored with what's happening. So the strong sensory dissatisfaction that sort of brews and stews can lead to boredom, right? Like I'm so bored with the television, I'm so bored with my books, I just can't get comfortable. I just want the easy chair, I don't want the hard chair, I don't want to sit on the floor, I want to hear that. But other times, boredom seems to be the exact opposite, right? So when the word torpor or lethargy seem much more apt, right? So when the physical or mental states are like weighed down, sluggish by absolutely nothing. It's that warm room in the college class and the lecture on how to watch paint to dry, and you just sit there and there's something sound that just keeps going and going and going. Our eyes sort of glaze over, our ears get this little whoosh, a hush. There's sort of this muffled characteristic to everything. All of our senses sort of get muffled rather than agitated. And there's like just nothing going on upstairs except that waiting for the clock to turn, for the next experience to happen, something different, better, or more exciting to appear. So we can look into boredom and all of our experiences and feelings, right? I mean, this is something that we do. This is what we do in meditation. We intentionally try to do this. And just as we looked into being amazed or being afraid, boredom is something to explore. So the looking into activity, sort of this awareness, is the first thing that we need to do, right? How do we get interested in it? How do we get to know these sensations and these patterns of boredom? And I think that's something that we all can get familiar with and that we're all probably fairly familiar with, whether or not we realize it. But if we fail to look into our situation, right? If we do nothing, then we just end up fighting it. We end up battling ourselves, or more correctly, we end up battling against the experience. So if an experience is positive or negative or neutral, there's always ways to deal with it, different ways to handle it, to overcome it. So we could apply an antidote. We could transform the experience. We could just sit with it. In order to know what to do, we need to find that interest in the experience. So this interest is really what I did before, trying to describe what these experiences of boredom is, to be curious about the experience, to engage with it. So maybe engaging is not the same as interacting, right? It's more like using our awareness to monitor the situation, like when we're trying to do shamatha. We're not engaging with everything, we're just watching it. It's sort of like this mental exercise of pulling out our phones to look at the live feed of all of our security cameras. What's the security camera of our mind? What's the security camera of our physical sensation? What's going on with our desire for food or taste or sight or hearing? And all these cameras are pointed at me. All of it is me, not just the physical form moving through space, but all these sights and sounds and smells and mental actions. So we need to get curious enough to watch ourselves through this awareness to determine what's going on and get a full picture. Being interested in ourselves is not the same as being interested in what's going on around us. So our experience is here, but there are other things out there. So engaging with the outside is not what I'm talking about at this point. It's also not the same thing as Vipassana. We're not trying to analyze it. We're not trying to judge it. We're not trying to apply logic to it. Awareness is sort of like a good child at this point, right? From the 80s. Be a good kid, be seen and not heard, right? So awareness is sort of seen, but not hearing. This is the curiosity into what is happening. And that's what we want to do first. After that, we have some decisions to make. So this is where we actually start doing the analysis, right? After we sort of watched and see what's going on and, sort of been aware of those physical feelings and mental things. Then we actually want to use some logic about our experience, add some words to it. These are sense perceptions in our mental consciousness to actually engage with it. Choices about what to do with this experience. So one of the ones when I was talking to Lama about with this was just settle in and let it play out. Just experience it while maintaining awareness, which is different from just experiencing it unaware, right? So it's not actively engaging with it or changing it. And this would be a Mahamudra approach. It's really hard to do. It's really hard just to be aware. Another approach would be to apply some antidotes. So you can also transform that experience. Lama Jinpa did warn generally that we try to increase our energy when we're bored, thinking that it's lethargy or depression, rather than it could be actually the more active type of boredom, which I'm going to say is the agitated boredom. To do so, we might go for some coffee or move around, try to actually physically change the actual experience, rather than change our mental perception about it. Rather than change our engagement with the experience, we change the actual experience. But that's not actually how antidotes would work. So antidotes to lethargy, according to Genlo Rinpa in Calming the Mind, which I hope you have all read. Uh, there's a couple of them. So pliancy, enthusiasm, aspiration, and faith. In other words, by generating joy or happiness and delight in our virtuous mental states, and having a wholesome wish for attainment of whatever, if it's the class, I want to ace this class on paint drying, and a conviction in our belief that maybe doing so is good for me, learning something is good for me, getting that A is going to be good for me, right? So whatever those beliefs are. So you can see some of your faces and you're saying, wait a minute, those are antidotes to meditation. What are they doing here? Why would I apply that in my class on watching paint dry? Because meditation is training for life. So meditation is a structured setting where we have the chance to sort of pursue a goal, if it's shamatha, if it's relaxing, if it's vipassana. We get to practice and train on how to handle certain situations when they arise. So knowing these antidotes and knowing these ways that we can apply these to different mental states and different physical states that arise, like, oh man, my knees hurt. Then when we get into a real life situation where we're trying to pay attention to our class and we're just bored out of our mind, then we have antidotes that we can apply. If we instead look at boredom as excitement, right, the state which distracts the mind, and then we try to apply these antidotes again, Lorna says, she says mindfulness and vigilance, but don't overdo it. These are two hard ones. They're very hard to apply in the correct amount, right? Which is why meditation training is great. So being mindfulness is really being a gentle guide to what we need to be doing, right? Oh, I'm in class. I have this teacher that I've tuned out. Okay, so that's the awareness. I've figured out what's going on. Then mindfulness is getting our experiential train back on track. And the vigilance is the quality of the quality or firmness of how we do this, right? So I want to say, oh, I want to get my train back on track. I'm being mindful. And vigilance is going to be like, do I need another train to blast me on to the tracks again? Or is it just a gentle nudge, right? So that quality of the vigilance, is it too much or too little? Are we being too heavy handed or are we being not firm enough? So if we have too much energy, or if we're sort of aggressive, anxiety, bored, how are we getting ourselves back on track? Gently or, wow, make a change. So I think those are actually really good. Antidotes are really good for a lot of things. What I find more interesting about boredom, though, is that it's a relatively new concept historically. It's only been around a couple years, 100 years about what is boredom in that term. And yet we already have some psychological evidence saying that this is a little different from all these other things, right? We have this interesting state. So how did it come about? Is it because of industrialization? Is it because our lives are, we have this extra time, right? We're not always thinking about, I got to chop wood, I got to get the water, I got to get the food, I got to chop wood, get the water, get the food, keep the place warm, feed myself, feed my kids, right? There's sort of a different hustle that we have in life these days. So what can we do with boredom? How can we actually transform boredom rather than sit with it or apply antidotes to it? Are there any benefits to transforming our boredom rather than applying antidotes or sitting with it? Would it be useful or harmful or neutral? I would posit that boredom is actually extremely necessary and useful. So Lama Jimpa pointed out that part of the path is learning how to get bored with our familiar stories. So he quoted Jordan Trumpa Rinpoche saying that we should sit long enough to experience cool boredom. We've seen similar quotes from other modern Western teachers from different traditions. And this is a type of not really adding, but a momentary paying attention in a special way. Cool boredom meaning to get away from the stuff that's making you claustrophobic, to create that space. Sort of like getting over what you're desired or attached to in order to break free, which sounds like the heart of the path to me, right? How do we sort of make these feelings and these sensations so boring in and of themselves that we can get beyond them, that we can do something different with that space that we've created in our minds? Additionally, I think that boredom is actually a space that we create through meditation, right? When you sort of calm down enough from the lives that we live of, I always have to do something. There's always something to experience. There's always something more to achieve, more money to be made, more leaves to be raked, more. By sort of creating that space, by calming down in meditation, we get bored. What do we fill that space with? What do we do? How do we make this engaging and useful? So catalysts for insights are progress along the path. I think also it's useful to create this space for boredom as a time for our minds to wander directionlessly. All right, a time when we just sort of graze close, maybe just skirt that non-conceptuality of experience. Times when we listen and appraise to what of our perceptions and our sensations are wrestling with, when we are not directing or dictating a course of action. We're just sort of along for that ride. When you pay attention to boredom, it gets unbelievably interesting. It's a quote from Jon Kabat-Zinn, who was the founder of the mindfulness sort of psychological revolution here in the US. So it seems to me that even he thinks that boredom is actually that interesting space where we can develop something, where our creativity or our realizations can start to arise. In some ways, I don't think that we allow for enough time to be bored, right? We always want to do something. We expect there should be something to do or to attend to. You know, oh, I've got to meditate. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. You know, and then we get anxious about that meditation time. We get anxious about that practice time, or we get anxious about work or making meals or cleaning up, rather than just sort of creating space for our minds to wander. So there's a Russian poet essayist named Joseph Brodsky. He was born in Russia. He has a very interesting communist story of getting sent to the gulags and ending up in Europe and then the US. But he wrote this wonderful piece called In Praise of Boredom. And it expresses these views much better than I ever could. It's several pages long, so I'm not going to read it to you, but I have a copy if you want to borrow that. He actually argues that boredom is the catalyst to creativity. So there's some psychological research that seems to support that. There's also some that seems to say, yeah, not so much. So I would prefer to trust the essayist on this rather than the researchers. And so I guess this is the main point of my talk, is that perhaps what Brodsky describes as what he's really advocating for is to transform boredom into something more akin like daydreaming, into something that's allowing our minds and our sensations to rule the roost so that we can be mindful and aware of that, to stop directing traffic, to lighten up on the vigilance while maintaining the awareness. I'm not going to argue that this is meditation or that this is actually non-conceptuality, but from my personal experience, I know that when I just sort of let things settle and I calm down and I stop considering or analyzing or holding to something, that a lot of times an answer seems to form or an idea seems to form on its own, and then it just sort of bubbles up to the top and I'm like, oh yeah, that's it. That's what that is. Am I bored during these times? Am I actually directing what I'm doing? Yeah. You know, that's when I put on, you know, something on YouTube. That's when I put on some music. That's when I go for a walk and I just sort of let things happen. I back off. I pretend like I am not ruling anything. And that's really hard. But it's usually when I'm out of that process and I let my mind, my consciousness, and my body sort of determine where we're going, then something wonderful happens. And that's when I can apply analysis. That's when I can determine if that idea is good or not, if that is helpful or harmful or neutral. That's when I can build off of it. And that's when it really sort of becomes boredom as benefit, boredom transformed from anxiety or lethargy or a problem into something useful. So I don't really have much more to say about boredom. I was talked out of inducing boredom, so maybe I've already induced boredom. But I really wanted to like sit here for like 12 minutes and just read the phone book to you and see what happens, um, which is sort of bad, but also hilarious. And you know, there's some research that says doing something boring or watching like a terrible long video of two guys just sort of slowly hanging clothes on a clothesline with very mundane conversation. Oh, do you need a clothespin? Why, yes, thank you. You dropped a sock. That you can actually get, the young psychological students to get a little bit more creative with what to do with paper cups afterwards. But I'm not sure that's really beneficial today. So I would like to open this up for questions or discussion, and hopefully you guys have something more interesting to say than I did. Any questions?
Thank you. Really interesting. Which is funny to say about boredom. Uh, um, so it's funny when you read the poet. I was thinking, what is the difference between boredom and daydreaming? Because to me, um, and daydreaming obviously is far more active, but that awareness that you're talking about is a kind of that sometimes we talk about it as a child who's like, just like in the museum and looking at the art and just eyes open and senses all the gates are open kind of thing. Versus I think of boredom as a kind of a like more akin to a dullness or ignorance.
Can we, I don't know, maybe the other thing needs to be, can we, we're trying to get these things. We'll just pass things back and forth then. Um, yeah, so I think that it's sort of like every other emotional state that we become aware of, right? If we're angry and we become aware of it, what happens to the anger? We've already, as much as I want to say like your awareness is not changing what you're feeling or perceiving, it does, right? Maybe the great masters can do that without changing it and with just, actually looking at the screens, the security cameras. I can't. That moment between awareness and analyzing and changing, applying an antidote, transforming it, deciding to sit there with it, I think is so fast for me that I can't be aware of my anger and then not have something happen to it. Right. As soon as I'm aware, there's that moment of, oh, I get angry with my anger and then I make a different choice or I start to try to figure it out. And I think that's the same thing experientially with boredom is that as soon as you're aware that you're bored, are you going to maintain that state? Are you choosing to maintain that state? Or are you just, oh, I'm bored. I need to get aggravated about my boredom. I need to, you know, dull it out. I need to do something different with it. And I think sort of what I would like to see in myself is that when I'm bored, I want to transform it into more daydreaming, transform that process and be aware of I don't need to be in control of everything. And I don't need to allow one sense to control everything. But I don't need to let the agitation of I'm not sitting right control the rest of my experience. So that dullness and deciding that it's just already something that I need to put more energy in, right? Apply an antidote that may be incorrect when that dullness is actually coming out of dissatisfaction. It's coming out of anger of what's actually happening. And I think that's what Lama was trying to warn against is that, people think, oh, I'm bored. I need to put more energy into it. And that's when we grab the coffee. That's when we, jump up and do some jumping jacks for a while. But I'm not sure that's actually the right thing to do. Um, but you got to sit with it and figure it out, I think. Um, and I think that's also why these quotes are really saying boredom is interesting. It's fascinating. What is happening? But I do think that most of them then go to that next step of transforming it into more something akin to daydreaming. Or, yeah, sure, that's what I do. Yeah. I, and I think that the transformation there is so quick that we maybe are not quite aware that we've actually changed our boredom, that we're now doing something different and more intentional, right? Like the boredom is sort of the out of controlness. I'm not in control. I'm just along for the ride of like the I can't change the outward situation. So the inward situation is just going to shut down because I don't like what's going on around me. So I'm just going to shut down and stop and try to stop. That there's sort of that weird moment between I want to go to sleep. I'm so bored. I just want to go to sleep. Just let me go to sleep. Let me actually exit the situation in that way. Totally turn off everything, turn off my awareness of what's happening. Right. But we can't get there because we're bored. Right. There's some agitation that's already there, even when it feels dull.
Just that borderline between boredom and unconsciousness, literal unconsciousness.
Yeah. And I think that's actually the interesting thing about boredom is that like it's not quite too much energy, it's not quite dull, it's not quite sleepiness, it's sort of this weird center space that's hard to define and hard to interact with because it's never quite the same, right? It's like going to the paint store and trying to find white paint. Yeah, I mean, you've got a whole catalog of whites. Like, really? Really? Do we need that? No. No, we do not need that. But that's what's there. And that's what our experience really is like for everything. I mean, happiness, excitement, anger, it's all sort of hard to categorize and hard to define. So boredom is the same way, which is why when we talk about antidotes, when we talk about transformation, we're actually saying do the same thing for all of these. And I get frustrated with that, especially like a couple years ago. I was like, what do you mean I have to do the same thing? They're different. How can applying the same catalysts, the same antidotes to very different experiences actually do any good? Like, you guys got to be nuts. But slowly over years of trying this and being like, oh yeah, I can I can apply the same instructions to everything. I can get a little better result sometimes. Not always. I mean, a lot of you know that I've had a lot of surgery over the past year and I've been bored out of my mind. And I will tell you, add some drugs from surgery and boredom together, and like that is a recipe for disaster. I mean, you've just screwed with your mental consciousness chemically, and your body is not doing well, and it hurts, and all of this. And what can you do except turn on Netflix or something and like zone out? And then you feel bad that you've zoned out, that you've just blawed for a week. But sometimes you can get those moments of having transformed that, having that awareness and that mindfulness and vigilance there. But don't trust it, especially when you're on drugs, because like that's not going to work out well. So
So I don't know if this is the same thing or not. Like yesterday, I went to an all day, and there was a Dharma talk that the schedule had for, I don't know, 40 minutes, including Q&A. And 2 hours later, it was still going. And I was really like, I had to go. I had a deadline thing and I had to leave. And I didn't want to leave in the middle of the Dharma talk, but I didn't have any choice. And and I was starting to get agitated, right? And the agitation, I think, didn't have anything to do with the deadline. It had to do with the fact that I had blood coming out of my ears from this Dharma talk. I mean, it was just like, and what it reminded me of was there was a Lama Zopa Rinpoche. And okay, so people know who he was. He would give Dharma talks that would last like for freaking days. And or at least so the people and really like 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, he would just go and go and go and go. And what he was getting towards was just surrender. Just, just give it up. Just surrender. And I think that's what I needed to do yesterday. So I would have not been so agitated. I mean, I had to leave, and so I did leave. And it was rude, and I was sorry about that. But, like they were like 2 hours off the schedule. So, but if I had just surrendered, just like, okay, this is what's happening. And yeah, sorry, but I got to go, as opposed to getting really agitated because of what was happening. But it reminded me of what Lama Zopa used to do, just hours and hours and hours and hours until people just surrendered, that or passed out. So yeah, so that's another. That's not an antidote. That is just giving it up.
So I think that's actually is an antidote. I think it's both an antidote. It's, we can sort of categorize that differently. We can say that surrender is an antidote because you're finding the faith or the enthusiasm in being rather than experiencing. It's also sort of that Mahamudra side of experiencing, right? But I think that's something that we in the West tend to get irritated about quite quickly, right? I got a schedule, I got somewhere to be. You said it'd be this, you said it'd be that. And then we get anxious about what we need to do, even though there's this other situation going on. And I think there's sort of that cool boredom that the teachers have, right? I'm going to keep going, and this is what I'm doing, and you guys are doing something else. You can come along with me on this trip that I've created, on my 3-hour tour that turns into years, or you can, get up and go to the bathroom and come back, or just leave, right? So I think when especially we add that expectation of politeness and rudeness to what am I experiencing in a group setting, I can't change my experience or apply an antidote that I need or comply with some other constraint that I have. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So we're always afraid of looking rude if we, move around during meditation group. We get up and go to the bathroom during meditation group. If we stop during, if we stop paying attention during the boring lecture and we go to the bathroom and come back, or we, make a change to how we are interacting with our life. And I don't think we need to. I think that's actually another interesting cultural thing that we have. Um, but I think that surrender that you sort of mentioned is that cool boredom. I think that really is what Trump Rinpoche was trying to get at, is that you can just experience things in life and not actually be attached to them, not get angry with them, not be attached to them, just let it happen. Do we have any online questions or comments? Or we put them all into a tuber and they've started playing solitaire or something? No, I'm not seeing anything online. Anything else in here? No. All right. Well, then I say we end a few minutes early or earlier than usual, and we get to do whatever we want to with our life.
Okay, so we'll do closing prayers. Due to the merits of this virtuous action, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. In a land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful Chenrezig Tenzing Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. May the teachings of the Buddha flourish, and may the upholders of the teachings remain forever. May all migrators achieve happiness, and may they fulfill all their temporary and ultimate goals. Losam, magical display of the deep awareness of all the victorious ones, merciful giver of a stream of profound and vast instructions to the fortunate migrators, please remain always unperishing, unchanging, unfading. Avalokiteshvara, great treasure of objectless compassion, Manzushri, master of flawless wisdom, Vajrapani, destroyer of the entire host of Maras, Sankapa, crown jewel of the snowy land sages, Losandrapa, I make requests at your holy feet.
A couple of announcements. So the schedule for Conchak Rinpoche's visit is online on the online calendar at this point. He's got a book signing and public talk Friday the 16th. On the 17th, in person only, will be a Mahamudra Jainong initiation. Oh, Mahakala. Thank you. Yes. That Saturday evening is going to be a more philosophical talk about identity, which I think I'm really excited about. I'm going to nerd out on that one. And then Sunday, instead of doing our Sunday service as usual online, it's going to be an in-person only Palden Lamo. So that Sunday there won't be an online component. And also on Saturday, I think there's a meditation group that's not going to happen. So if you come to that, just know that that Saturday we won't be doing that. Other announcements?
Yeah, I forgot to put this in the roar, but I'll do it for this week. There's a Delic meeting next Saturday at 11. So this is the service club. So we're reading a book called No Time to Lose, which is Pema Chödrön's commentary on the Bodhicharya Vitara, the Bodhisattva way of life. So we're meeting next Saturday at 11. And I think, is there a yard thing going on? Yeah, you said, yeah, there's a garden party, and our landscape designer extraordinaire.
You're all welcome to attend on the 10th, May 10th. The garden, it's not a garden tour. It's we're just gonna fix things up around here, do some pruning, raking, mowing, and then also teach the volunteers who'll be volunteering to mow throughout the course of the year a few things that they'll need to know moving forward. So that's what we'll be doing 9 o'clock next Saturday. Thank you.
So right in the middle of that is the Delic meeting. So you could take a break and come inside. Yeah, okay. Okay, thanks, everybody.
Omo araya pazayana indi om araya pazana indi omo